promoting the free exchange of ideas, questioning the status quo, and having some fun along the way. This is the Are We Idiots Show. Now here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another episode of the Are We Idiots Show. As mentioned, we are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll. Kroller, how are you, buddy?
Good, Weave. How are you? It's a beautiful sunny day, but I'll tell you this. If I have to listen or see one more highlight of Olympic curling, I'm going to shove a meat thermometer in my ear.
All right, the Olympic curling references are hereby done, right?
That was the last one.
Okay, good. All right, so I'm excited. I know you are. We got a great show planned for everyone. And let's just briefly recap our last show before we move into this week's episode. So last week we talked about guns in America. It was a lively debate, emotional issue for some of our listeners. We got some feedback, and not surprisingly, the feedback was on both sides. Maybe not sides. There's feedback of all different types. And then we got some feedback from a listener that gave us a suggestion for a future episode, and we love it. Right, so follow us on Twitter at Are We Idiots. Go to the Contact Us page of the website. Shoot us your thoughts. Tell us why we're wrong. Tell us how we can improve. It's all good, and we encourage it. So, with that, we're going to go over this week's show agenda. We're going to do first the Idiot of the Week award, and I'm nominating folks this week. Then we're going to talk about the role of the U.S. military and the proper role. That'll be interesting. Rich will tell us when he was an idiot, and we could do a lot of shows on that.
Hey, hold on there.
We'll get into that later. And then make sure you stay tuned to the end of the show, the return of the Kroller Wiki, which has been a popular feedback on the Kroller Wiki. Kroller, you're very knowledgeable, and people love it.
I'm like a vast thimble with holes in it.
Okay, so I'm going to give you two nominees. One's a little on the serious side, since we're talking about the military today, and that leads into foreign policy a little bit. I'm going to give you one serious Idiot of the Week nominee and one not so serious. So the first one is Turkish President Erdogan. He's under fire because at a nationalist rally, he saw a little 6-year-old girl with a military uniform on, and he brought her up on stage. She began crying. He tried to console her by kissing her on both cheeks. And then he proclaimed to the crowd, and I quote, "She has the Turkish flag in her pocket. If she becomes a martyr, God willing, this flag will be draped on her." And the crowd cheered.
Wow.
So, what a loser. First of all, to embarrass the little 6-year-old girl. She's crying, upset. He pulls her up on stage. And then he says, wouldn't it be great if she died for our country? So that's tough to beat. It's a little on the serious side, I realize, but that's nominee number one.
Tough to make fun of that one, but let's see what you have for number two.
So the second one is a little more on the humorous side. So Los Angeles news station KABC reports that the California Highway Patrol stopped a man early Saturday on State Route 91 in Long Beach. Officers administered field sobriety tests, which registered blood alcohol levels of 0.21 and 0.19, respectively. They did it twice, evidently. That's more than double the legal limit, as most people know. Here's where it gets interesting. The man was arrested and booked for, quote, riding a horse while under the influence. The white horse, Guerra, wasn't hurt and was released to the man's mother. The California Highway Patrol offered a message to the public on Twitter. Quote, "No, you may not ride your horse on the freeway, and certainly not while intoxicated."
Okay, well, thank you for number two. It's going to make my decision a lot easier. Hey, look, as far as the Turkish president and embarrassing and maybe even frightening a little 6-year-old girl, I have a little girl that's horrifying. So I don't know if that qualifies as idiot or just evil, clueless. That's a different category. So I'm going to give the Idiot of the Week to the gentleman galloping down a horse on the highway, hammered after about a bottle of tequila in the system. Because let me tell you something. I know horses, right? I mean,
They don't know any better.
They don't know any better, and loud noises, backfires, car noises, horns, they could run in any direction and just cause major, major chaos.
How polluted do you have to be to take your horse up on the highway?
I think if I blew a .1, I could control myself from getting on a horse. Once you get to the .2 number, he could have rode a turtle or, an elephant or a camel. I mean, there's no controlling a human at that level.
Oh, my goodness. So this gentleman gets our dollar check and the weekly award, the third weekly Idiot of the Week award. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the big subject of the day, the role of the U.S. military. And so, Kroller, I revealed on a prior episode that I'm a libertarian, and there's probably no greater chasm between libertarians and conservative Republicans than that of the role of the military. And let me just say, as a preface, there's no greater trait than someone that would risk their lives or lay down their lives for the safety of someone else. So this is not about the troops, right? And there's this confusion out there that if you criticize policy, you're criticizing the troops. But this is not about that. My thesis is that the policymakers, the leaders of this country, the people that commit the troops, they have a bias towards war, and there should be an extremely high bar for war, which we've not honored ever since World War II. And I can go into some of the details, but that's the big picture premise. Any comments before I give you my ammo?
Well, hey, look, I'm a big, big fan of the military, our military at least. I have a lot of friends that were in the military, including every branch, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. I know somebody. In fact, I know somebody well. Not only friends, but family, and historical family, going back to World War I, World War II. So I also am a big fan of the military, and I do think there's a disconnect between what the military is ordered to do, what the military actually does do, and the connection to, whether it's government or superior orders and missions.
So let me give you a little stats. And again, I contend that most of this happened after World War II. If most people know the history of it, we didn't really want to get into World War II. We were isolated.
We didn't want to get into World War I either, actually.
Right. And we were isolationists in nature. The British, once France fell, the British basically begged us to get involved. We reluctantly did so. But since the end of World War II, and if you think about the conflicts that we've been involved with, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, the Gulf War, Yemen, Libya, Syria, all these places, right? What have we really gotten for that? There's very little anything substantive that we've gotten out of that as a nation. All we've had is sacrifice, dead bodies, maimed people, trillions of dollars. And I don't get it why we have to be all over the world. We have 1,000 bases in 80 countries. We're the world's policemen, and it's reckless.
Well, let's look at how we got to this point and evolved, because I think it's analogous to the amendment discussions we had where something was written or done or formed for a specific purpose, and then what happens 100, 200 years later, is it still relevant in the context it was developed? So the military, we first of all absolutely need it, but if you look back when we were just forming as a country and we were the melting pot, we still are the melting pot, but we were at risk, versus everybody, right? Especially Great Britain or England and France and everybody else that had their eye on the United States territory before it was the United States. So we needed to protect ourselves.
Right.
And
I don't think anyone disagrees with that.
Right. No one disagrees with that. That's the
right. There's evil people that will try to invade if you don't have a defense, but provide for the common defense was the wording they use. In my world, defense repels people that are offensive, but hey, maybe we've evolved.
Well, what happened was, let's say starting with World War I, other countries started recognizing, hey, this new U.S. is a pretty big, badass new country with a lot of technology advancements and a lot of personnel and a lot of dedication and commitment to causes. And we kind of need their help, or we'd sure like their help, right? So as things happened, especially with Germany and Germany becoming a dominant player, and England and France, et cetera, not maybe having enough troops and strength and technology to defend themselves, we took notice, right? And I can go through all the history of World War I and World War II, how we got involved, but I think they were just causes, because if we didn't, as many people say the famous phrase, we'd be speaking German, right? I mean, it's possible that we could have been taken over, and the landscape of today's world would have been much, much different if we didn't get involved.
So that's certainly possible. We can't prove what would have happened with Germany. You could make an argument, and I've heard the argument made that empires usually collapse because they overextend themselves. With the Ottomans, certainly the Holy Roman Empire did that. But let's just assume that we had to get involved in World War II. I guess what I'd like to focus the discussion on is, why do we need to spend, we're going to spend $700 billion this year on defense. That's more than the next 8 countries combined. Many of those countries are larger than us, have a much higher population than us. We have troops stationed all over the world. We have 30,000, 50,000 troops between Korea and Japan, 70 years after the war. We have a city in Germany, Ramstein Air Base, which is basically a city. Germany is one of the richest countries in the world. Why can't they defend themselves?
Well, this is where the actual discussion comes into play, and I also question the logic or the common sense of it. So, again, not to go backwards, we know why we got involved in World War II, the bombing of Pearl Harbor. We know why we got involved in Korea and Vietnam, whether right or wrong, to try to prevent the spread of communism. So I'm not even going to go back and debate the Vietnam War, because, and there's a ton that's come out recently in documentaries, and 50-year later documents finally can be exposed to the public, which are pretty egregious and concerning. And but let's look at today. Everything we did up and say through Vietnam War made some level of sense. Why are we the world's police? I think just because we became that and we adhered to it, and then there's a lot of money involved between the federal government and the military, and they're, quite frankly, I used quite frankly. I was not going to use the phrase "quite frankly" because that's your phrase, but I just used it. There's a lot of people in the United States that, after high school, don't want to go to college or don't want to start a business, and the military is a great avenue for that, and it keeps expanding. So it's hard to put a clamp on that, but I have my own statistics. I'm big in statistics.
Go for it. So
the 5 largest U.S. military bases are Fort Bragg in North Carolina, population 238,000, 163 acres. Fort Campbell, Kentucky, 234,000, 105 acres. Fort Hood, Texas, 217,000, 214,000 acres. On and on and on. The naval, they're Army bases. The naval's biggest naval base,
Norfolk. Right.
Norfolk,
Right.
or Norfolk. That's actually how you pronounce it. I've never been comfortable with that. But
Wow.
104,
You just boosted our rating to NC-17.
I once was pronouncing it Norfolk to avoid that, and I was corrected 100 times when I was down there for business. 149,000, 3,400 acres. The Joint Base in Pearl Harbor, Navy and Marines, 55,000, 27,000 acres. On and on and on and on. I have to admit it does seem excessive, because we're not staging air or ground world wars. And I'm not going to get into should we be in Afghanistan or Iraq or Libya and all the other places. But even when we do, and we need 20,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 people,
we never leave. We never leave.
Well, we never leave, but it does seem like we have millions of troops, and do we really need those? I don't know. It doesn't seem proportionate to the wars or the battles we're still involved in.
And maybe the war planners will say, well, you need a certain amount in back at home here to rotate them into theater and all that kind of stuff. I'm not conversant enough of military strategy to understand what troop levels you need. But what I do know is that we have 199,000, at least last year, people around the world. We have 1,700 people in Jordan. 300 people in Saudi Arabia. We have 1,900 people in Djibouti. We have people in
Djibouti?
Djibouti.
Is that a real place?
We own a naval base in Cuba. no one even like blinks an eye. Like, is that strange that we own a naval base in another country that is our mortal enemy up until a couple of years ago when we opened relations?
That one actually makes more sense to me because it's right off of Florida, so anything close to home to protect us. But it doesn't make sense.
But anyhow, I guess my main point is that I think it's perfectly patriotic.
Perfectly patriotic.
Yeah, we like the alliteration on this show. To question and be skeptical of the people that commit our men and women to war. War should be extremely high bar. We have to realize that, as you rightly point out, that there's a lot of money being filtered to these politicians who don't send their own kids to war. They send let's be honest, the lower socioeconomic group goes to war and fights and dies. And I think we should be skeptical of that. I think we should pull back, instead of that $700 billion, how about we do this? Why don't we spend 50% more than the next country and save that $300 billion to arm, put guards in schools, build bridges and roads. Who knows what good we could do here at home if we weren't the world's policemen.
Well, I think, and that's a great question. And really what it comes down to, this whole topic, should we be the world's policeman? Now, if no one else is willing to do it or has the resources or the finances or the personnel, maybe we should. But I'll tell you what, and I have no problem with all the Army bases, naval bases, Marines, Air Force, et cetera, in the United States. It's there. It's actually employment for our kids who aren't going to college.
So it's a jobs program?
You know what? It really is in some cases. I mean, look how they promote it. Go
can't
into
we
the
be
military.
doing other things than other than teach them how to kill people?
Well, hold on. Go into the military and we'll pay for your college after, So, but the biggest problem I have, or I'd like to address, are the overseas military bases.
Amen.
I think that's where the problem lies. As you correctly stated, and I'll just repeat the statistics, according to David Vine, professor at American University who compiles a lot of these statistics, he calculates maintaining bases and troops overseas cost $85 to $100 billion, or that was a 2014 number, $85 to $100 billion, and the total with bases and troops in war zones is between $160 and $200 billion. So I don't know that we need multiple bases. We have multiple bases in Afghanistan, Germany, Japan, Italy, South Korea, and the United Kingdom. And then we have single bases in Denmark, Greenland, Kuwait, Portugal, Qatar, Spain, Turkey, etc.
We have 1,000 bases.
I don't know. I don't see why we need all those.
And here's what I would say is Afghanistan, okay. If someone's going to come back to us and say, well, Osama bin Laden attacked us, Al-Qaeda attacked us, we need to go to Afghanistan. Okay, I'll give you that. We got him 8 years ago. We've gotten the whole top hierarchy of Al-Qaeda. Come on home now. We don't need to build up Afghanistan. It's not our business.
Well, a lot of these bases are supposedly strategic with positioning where...
In case something happens?
Well, yeah, an ally or a friend allows us, it'll help us intercept boats or missiles, say in Greenland or in Australia, whatever the case may be. But the question is, are wars really in the future? If a world war is not going to be a ground war and a plane war, it's going to be a nuclear war. If it's a pure world war. So I don't know. It seems excessive to me to have this much investment in military to police the world. Although I do think somebody needs to take on that responsibility and no one else will.
Yeah, but my point is the home country needs to take on the responsibility to defend themselves. And that, I'm not saying in every possible situation that's going to be doable, but South Korea, rich nation, they should defend themselves. Japan, rich nation, they should defend themselves. Germany, rich nation, defend yourselves. France, defend yourselves. So I don't think we need to step into all these places. So the last thing we want to talk about, which is a little bit...
Let me just agree. I'm going to agree with you. We rarely ever agree, even since we were 14 years old. Why do we have investment in wealthy countries that can protect themselves? So I think part of the answer would be, let's keep everything we have in the U.S., mainland U.S. Let's keep some of the strategic places, but we could probably get rid of a lot of these other places. I mean, I know it's not as easy as that, but let's get rid of Germany and France and Italy and everywhere else that doesn't need us.
So the last question I have, which is topic that will touch some nerves. Does the fact that we are in all these countries, and let's face it, whenever we have active campaigns, we're going to kill civilians. It happens all the time, whether you're a Republican or Democrat president, we've killed civilians innocently by mistake. And does that breed people that hate us? And I put myself in the case, like if, doesn't care if it's a war or an accident or not, if someone kills my family with a smart bomb or a drone strike, I'm going to be pretty pissed. So are we causing problems for ourselves by being in all these places?
Yes and no. I mean, I've traveled the world a decent amount, and most of the places I've been, an American's well received. Oh, you're an American. They think we're celebrities. But I'll tell you, it's changed over the last, say, 20 years. I've been places where I'm in a bar, restaurant, maybe there's a group of people from Scandinavia or whatever. Hey, I'd like to send a shot over to you. I've had it turned down a couple times. And when I found out that
You're afraid it was poisoned?
Well, either it was poisoned or coming from me, a big, bald-looking terrorist, Russian terrorist-looking guy. So, but I found out that it's changed a little bit. Before it was, hey, you're an American, to, oh, you're an arrogant American. You're an aggressive, militaristic American. You're a force your policies, imperialist, force your policies on everybody American.
Right.
And I think that has changed over the years.
Yeah, and I too have traveled a lot, and what I notice is most of the time people are the same. They want the same things that Americans want. They want their kids to grow up and have better lives than themselves. They want to be safe. They want to have a decent income and a safe place to live. It's the policymakers, it's the politicians that cause most of the problems. So anyhow, so in my mind, I think the politician out there that speaks the most truth nowadays is Rand Paul, and he's of my same mindset with pulling back and scaling back on our overseas roles in the military. So that's my endorsement, my Rand Paul endorsement of the week.
Thanks for that. Really, really appreciate that.
Okay, so we're going to move on.
Can I just make a conclusion?
Sure.
Listen, I love the military. I love everybody that puts their life on the line. Anybody I know in the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines is way tougher than I am. And as Jack Nicholson ranted in A Few Good Men, you can't handle the truth, right? I mean, we need to have guys with guns on walls protecting our freedom, and we shouldn't complain all the time about how that's done. However, I do agree, if maybe we could save $50 billion a year by getting out of places that are already wealthy and can protect themselves, and using that $50 billion towards schools and infrastructure and technology and all sorts of healthcare and poverty programs in the U.S., which we always need.
Not to mention the moral aspect of it, but we'll leave that for another show. So we're going to move on, and we mentioned last show that from time to time, Rich and I have been idiots in our past. So, Rich, you have the mic. I know you got a lot of options to go with, so I'm anxious to hear the story you come up with.
I don't have as many as you profess, but yes, I have had interesting moments in my life. Here's one that came to mind. As you know, I was at one time in my youth a bit of a hothead in sporting events.
No.
I'm a sore loser. I hate to lose, and I've often, and we'll get into some of those stories, but I just hate to lose at anything, and especially if I think I could have affected the outcome in a positive way. So when I took up golf, this is probably story 20 or 25 years ago, I thought I should be good right away. I got pretty good at one time, about a 13 or 14 handicap, but overall I'm very average, and today I stink. But there was a time where I was getting pretty good at golf, and I was with three good buddies, Paul French, Brant Bodner, and Kevin Mullen at Cape May National Golf Course in South Jersey, Wildwood, New Jersey. And I was having a pretty up and down round. Actually, I sucked. And I came to the 18th par 5, and I told my buddies, I was deeply frustrated. It was a miserable day. I said, listen, I hit a beautiful drive right down the middle. I said, I'm going to go for a risky shot right here, and I'm going to go for the green, and I got to hit a perfect shot. And if I don't, or if I catch any bad luck, I am throwing my golf bag in the river or lake next to the 18th green. And they all kind of chuckled. So I got up over my shot. I think it was a 3-iron or something, and I hit the most perfect shot a young Jack Nicklaus would have been proud of. I mean, it was that soaring, start low, take off, dead beat down the middle, 210-yard shot.
At least you had one in your life.
This was the one. And there was a lake to the right and a lake to the left and a little landing area up to the green. It was going right for that landing area, and it hit a branch last minute over that landing area and shot the ball directly into the lake. So everybody looks at me like, okay, dude, you going to do what you said?
So how close were you to the lake at this point?
I'm right next to the green.
Oh, okay.
The ball it would probably be my first eagle on a par 5 in my life. So we walk up. We're not sure exactly where it landed because there was a bit of a downward slope towards the pond. And I said, guys, if it's in, my bag's in. And we walked up, and lo and behold, it was in. Now, this wasn't a lake. This was one of those stagnant bogs.
Like a retention pond?
Like a retention pond that in the middle of 95-degree humidity in South Jersey over the course of a couple of months.
Mosquito-ridden, probably.
Mosquitoes, foam, algae, diseases, mold, scurvy, Bora Bora. You're talking about, sepsis. It's brown, it's green, it's bubbling. It looked like,
a witch's brew?
Witch's brew, like an alien that popped out of that guy's stomach in an alien movie. Could pop up at any given moment. I actually saw something with a back and, swirling through this mess. I said, guys, that's it. I hate this game. I took the bag off my shoulder and I heaved it. I mean, the heave was the best part of my game. About 25 yards into this bubbling, diseased bog. My friends are cracking up, and as I'm walking off, I hesitate in shock. And I go, oh, my God.
I think I know what.
My keys are in the bag. My car keys are in the bag.
Oh, my God.
So I had to take my shoes and socks off and
wade in.
I walked in.
You had to wade bogs?
I had a wade bog waist deep. I still have a twitch in my left eye and a kidney issue. I had to go in waist deep, pull this thing out, grab my keys. I smelled like a urinal at Vet Stadium. And then I left the bag there. And
you did leave it. Okay, that's what I was
did
going to
leave
ask
it
you.
there.
So you left the bag there and just got the keys and went home.
Got my keys, went home, took 7 showers, and covered myself in antiseptic. And I'm still messed up to this day.
So were you all wet in the car going home? You had no change of clothes, I guess.
Nothing. I put a beach towel down, and the car smelled for a year and a half.
That's a great story. I can't wait to hear the next one because I'm like, I know a couple stories, and actually one of our listeners wrote in with a couple of reminders of some idiot stories. So we got plenty of ammo for this, but great story, Crawler, and we're going to move on to the Crawler Wiki. So your mind has to be sharp now. So the Crawler
Sharp as a bowling ball.
So the Crawler Wiki, for you listeners who didn't hear one of our previous episodes, is where Rich tells us the origin of a common saying, and I grade him on it and provide the actual origin. The first one we're going to do today is let your hair down. Where does that saying
Let your hair down. So as you know, especially in the London area, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, they developed a practice where in a court of law, the judge and the jurors and the lawyers would actually wear a white, like George Washington wig to signify their elite status in society as court members, judges, etc. And nobody really knew what their hair looked like. Was it long? Was it short? Were they bald? Was it blonde? So at the end of a tough hearing, when everybody got together to have their ales and their lagers and their Jägermeister, they would then take their wigs off, and everybody got to see them loosen up and let their hair down.
That's very close. I'm going to give you half credit. So the real reason is Parisian nobles risked condemnation, I can say that, condemnation, from their peers if they appeared in public without an elaborate hairdo. Some required hours of work, so it was relaxing to come home after a long day and let your hair down. So you get half credit on that. You're very close to the concept.
Thank you.
Next one, spill the beans. What is that? Where'd that originate?
Spill the beans. So there was a time in many agricultural societies where they weren't good hunters. They didn't know how to shoot an arrow or chase a boar down with a knife in their mouth. So they harvested beans and vegetables. But beans were considered an elite vegetable, right? So They'd send out the
As
best,
they are today, of course.
always have been. Beans.
Good for your heart.
The more you eat, right? Anyway, so back, and I don't know if this is 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, but it's a long time ago. So the problem was people tried to get the most beans possible in their containers, but containers were very rudimentary, made out of weeds and flax seeds. So if you stuffed them too full, on your way back to the village, they would often break. And that was a big no-no, right? Because they were the elite food. So what would happen was they'd gather everybody up at the end of the day over this big pile of spilled beans, and to get someone to tell the truth, they'd say, okay, guys, it's time to spill the beans.
Okay, so that's not even close. So in ancient Greece, colored beans were used in secret voting procedures. One container for each candidate was set out, and a white bean was placed in the container if they approved of the candidate, and a black bean if they did not. Sometimes a clumsy voter would knock over the container and reveal the otherwise confidential vote, spilling.
I still think my story was true, but just maybe not how the saying came from.
All right, well, the last one, hopefully neither of us had to go through this, but go cold turkey. Most people understand what that means in today's society, and we got a lot of problems out there that involve this, but go cold turkey, where did that come from?
So go cold turkey is a very common saying. We all know it's related to addicts and withdrawal symptoms, but what people don't realize was in the early 1900s, as we were experimenting with patients for mental issues and addictions, we did a lot of tests. And one of the first successful tests was to give a drug addict actual raw turkey. And they found that the raw protein, the raw turkey, with the way they chewed it and the way it was difficult to digest, would actually help reduce the symptoms of withdrawal.
Well, turkeys are disgusting in and of themselves, but raw turkey is even worse. I that's turning my stomach. But
I think that study may have been overturned years later.
All right, so people believe during withdrawal, the skin of the addicts became translucent, hard to touch, and covered with goose bumps, just like the skin of a plucked turkey, which is really disgusting when you.
Am I close on that?
I got a bad visual. No, I can't.
Not even a quarter point.
I can't give you that one. No.
So I got 1 out of 3.
1 out of 3. You've done better, but I loved your first one. I think you were right on target with that one. I would have given you full credit, but I just couldn't. All right. So, any final comments before about the role of the U.S. military or anything we talked about before we close the show?
Love the military. We need the military. I want the military, but I'm going to ask my military buddies: do we need to be in all these wealthy countries that can protect themselves?
Amen. So, we'd like to remind our listeners that we want to hear from you. We talked about it a little earlier in the show. @AreWeIdiots is our Twitter handle. Go to the Contact Us portion of our website. Tell us what we can do to improve, and suggestions for future shows. Also, make sure you tune in next week when we talk about the plague on our society of immediate gratification.
IGN.
It's a term we've coined. It involves not only personal households but our federal budget deficit as well. We'll touch on both aspects of that. As we close the show, and in a subtle knock, maybe not so subtle knock, to the false premise of how we were led into the Iraq War, enjoy some of Since I Lied by the Eric Weaver Experience. And remember, if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See you all next week. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Are We Idiots Show. Please subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher so you can enjoy all episodes.